I was like, huh, that's kind of weird.
I've been helping Lily do her homework. I totally forgot.
Nice. How many people do we have signed up for this thing?
Let me check. Uh, Counts, webinars today. 14.
That's not awful.
No, that's not bad.
So, okay, cool. I'm gonna put myself on mute for a couple minutes. So,
Yeah, I'll mute me too.
cool.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Cropking question and answer. It is 11 o'clock, so we'll get started. Kind of as an intro, hi, I'm Jake. I'm one of the horticulturists here at Cropking. Let me turn the light on so I'm a little brighter. How we work these, we do them every other week, and there is a question and answer section box on the Zoom meeting. So the idea is you'll just text or put in your question you have down there, and we kind of order them in the order we get them, and kind of go through it that way. So questions can be anything related to your greenhouse, hydroponics, or stuff we do here at Cropking. We run these from 11 o'clock to about noon. They are being recorded and be put up on the website and YouTube afterwards. So with that, if you've got any questions, I see we've got a couple people in there right now. And so we kind of go at it based on questions. I know we'll have one other tech person from here at Cropking, Jeff Baldoff, who's our construction sales jack of all trades, that'll be joining us too. So So just to make sure everybody knows, you're not frozen or anything. We're just waiting for a couple questions. If there isn't any questions, you can always just give topics and we can talk about them too. So again, there's the chat panel you can put them in, or the Q&A section on Zoom. Either one works. I know we had, I see we had one question left over from last week, so I'll read that one, or I should say from last time. And the question was about fertilizer. So the fertilizers we offer here, you kind of have two different options. You have a option for a custom mix. So what a custom mix means is we take a look at your water sample and they come through and look at that based on what we would do for your specific crop. And so we take into account what's in your water sample and then add the nutrients back needed for the crop to make a total mixture for what those plants need. That's what we call a custom mix, custom formulation. Now, when we do a general mix, that's something that we've designed to cover quite a few different crops all at once. So that would be something like our HydroGrow Leafy, which is designed to cover all sorts of the herbs and leafy crops. And then HydroGrow Vine, which is designed more for a tomato, cucumber, pepper plants, that kind of stuff. In those kind of mixes, it's everything but calcium nitrate. So you would have to still have calcium nitrate and some sort of pH adjustment. So that's kind of the quick answer to that question about the different fertilizers we offer. And again, on custom mix, what we do is we come up with the math that says how much we would use of each individual compound. So for example, how much magnesium sulfate, calcium nitrate, potassium nitrate, and that to get to the amount of fertilizer you need for that specific crop and formula we have. So definitely a good question. We look at water samples all the time, kind of going after that too. When we talk about water samples, we want to have a water test. So we recommend going with either like Clemson or A&L Labs. Any analytical lab that can test the water and determine how many parts per million or what actually is in each that water for all of the main nutrients we look for plants. So that'd be, you know, your NPK, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, iron, zinc, copper, moly, and boron. It's kind of what we're interested in. So it's a little bit different than just a water drinking health test, but still a good option. So make sure your keyboards are flying. I don't see any other questions at the moment. And again, if you don't have questions, you can always email them or send them to our website ahead of time too. That's kind of a common way of getting questions answered, just like that last one we had. So I'm just checking the email to see if anyone has sent any in that direction. All right. So next one I see is, what recommendations do you have for lighting? LED, HPS, or hybrid HPS LED? So lighting gets real interesting. Biggest thing with that, if the person who asked that question give us a follow-up of what kind of crop and environment. So lighting, we have two different options. If we're completely indoors, the idea there is we got to supplement or give the light completely for what that plant needs. Whereas if we're in a greenhouse, we come up with what we call supplemental lighting, which is just to take into account what we're getting from the natural environment and adding some to that. Once we know what we and how much light we need to make for those plants, then we can come up with a recommendation on what kind of light fixtures you have. Okay, cool. So the follow-up for that question was for a greenhouse. So yeah, so in a greenhouse setting, this is when we're going to be talking about supplemental lighting. And so with supplemental lighting, that's when you're going to be using that for adding additional light to the crops that are inside of there. So there's kind of some misnomers out there, and there's pros and cons to both LEDs and HPS. So some of the pros, HPS is a cheaper fixture usually, and they throw out quite a bit of light. But the biggest thing with HPS is they give off quite a bit of heat also when they give off light, and they have to be relatively high up into the structure of the greenhouse. So that way we have good coverage from those lights. Now, LEDs are expensive. They're coming out with new LEDs all the time. And so the biggest thing with LED lighting is to match what kind of spectrum you want with your specific LED light. So obviously, for in case of a greenhouse, real common to see those blue and red spectrum. That's what the plants respond to. But there's also white LEDs that we see out there. Biggest thing, costs compared to the fixtures, LEDs are going to be at least double most times than HPS for power wise. Yes, LEDs are a little bit more efficient for the amount of energy they use, but on the other hand, you still have to a couple times get them a lot closer to the crop depending on what kind of LED fixtures you have. But again, with this question, or if you have questions about actual lighting, let us know, because the biggest things we look for when we talk about lighting for greenhouses, how tall is your structure, what kind of crop are you growing, and then how much space you have between the top of the crop and where the light's going to go. And we can kind of help, and your budget obviously, help decide what lights to go with them. So really good question with that one. And I see Jeff joined us.
Yeah, I'm on here.
Well, they had a question of, what do we recommend for lighting? LED, HPS, or combination of both?
Well, I mean, I think Jake explained that pretty well, but you know, there's lots of projects out there that are now total LEDs, but there's still the trend for a mix of the two. I guess a lot of it depends on the crop that you're growing and the actual situation that you have, because of height requirements for some lighting, especially HPS lighting. And what you may or may not already have in place. I mean, on a new construction project, we would probably look at all LEDs.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree with that, Jake?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it also, the fun part too is, like, for example, the crop wasn't put in the question part, but if it's something as simple as microgreens, there's also compact fluorescence where we don't really need a whole heck of a lot of light for that kind of crop.
Yeah, that's
So
why I
really
said it.
depends.
It depends on the crop and the situation. I mean,
Yep.
you know, it's another one of those things. It's crop and environment and structure and specific, really.
Yep. It also counts too, and I guess this doesn't get talked about quite a bit, is what kind of lights you're going to use them for. Because there's also lights out there for what we call like season extension, or where we're trying to change the photo
Yeah.
period in a greenhouse.
right.
And that's a whole different topic compared to supplemental lighting, like we were mentioning for LED versus HPS. But
That's very true.
yeah, lighting gets real complicated. But
Really
the cool thing-
fast.
yeah. Cool thing about it is there's lots of options out there nowadays. So, and we work with all sorts of different light manufacturers. And so if there's something that you're particularly interested in, we can help you with that. So with that, got caught up. We only had 2 questions so far. So that was
Okay.
one on fertilizer and one on lights. So
I can't seem to get the text box to come up for the question.
that's okay. I'll just read them to you. So I think this is a follow-up to the last one. It says, for supplemental lighting, does it make a difference when supplemental lighting is turned on? And then it goes morning before with sunrise or evening with sunset. Question is for both vine crops and leafy greens.
I don't know whether there's any real great answer for that, other than the trend seems to be to turn them on in the morning before sunrise, and then let Mother Nature put your plants to bed. But there's also days where you may have lights on, especially in the short wintertime days. You may have lights on past, sunset anyways. It all depends on whether you're controlling your lights only on a time period, or whether your environmental control has DLI capacity to actually run the lights to your set DLI for the crop.
Right. Luckily enough, in both of these cases, vine crops and leafy greens aren't as photosensitive as if you were growing something like cannabis or hemp, or let's say even hops. And so being able to run your lights a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, like Jeff is saying, based on your DLI target, isn't that crazy. I see quite a few more people now doing it based on DLI. So the idea is they have a light sensor in the greenhouse that's actually measuring the amount of light coming from nature. So this light sensor is going to be in the greenhouse, but above where you're hanging your lights. And then it determines, okay, I know I'm getting X amount of light from the light fixture, so I'm going to turn the light fixtures on so I get a total for that. And so like you'll see it on a cloudy day where the lights may come on. The next day it's sunny, so the lights won't be on. So that's kind of the more recent one. It also is going to be based on your area too. So I know some people have restrictions about having greenhouse lights on and off. And in those fun places, they kind of dictate when they can be lit or not lit. So good question with that one. So next question. How do you know when it is time to replace the greenhouse cover?
Well, generally, I mean, we consider greenhouse covering is all what they call 4-year plastic, which means that the UV inhibitors in the plastic will retain its light transmission properties for approximately 4 years. So at the very maximum use, you should change your covers every 4 years. Some growers will replace it every 3 years or 3.5 years, depending on the time that they put it on and what their crop cycle is, and other considerations, because they feel like that last 6 to 9 months of that 4-year period, they're starting to lose usable light in the greenhouse. And if that period matches the wintertime period when you want to get maximum light in there, then having new plastic going into wintertime, if you're growing, no matter what crop you're growing, would be a benefit.
Right, right. I'd also mention, depending on how dirty your plastic is too. So
Yeah.
it's a combination of the plastic itself breaking down, and then if you live in a dirty area with a lot of more open fields, you may be replacing your plastic more often than some of our other areas where the things around the greenhouse is a little cleaner.
Yeah.
Nope, go ahead.
Well, and don't take it as, 4-year plastic, it's going to start falling apart in 4 years, because that's not true at all. It's just the UV inhibitors in there to keep it from yellowing are only active for about that 4-year period.
Right. Yeah, the actual structural of the plastic can last much, much longer. But what we find is every year after that 4-year mark, you just start losing so much light coming through the greenhouse that it's a benefit to get new clean plastic on it so you don't limit the light. So,
I've been in greenhouses that had older plastic on it somewhere in the 6+ years, and you go in there with a light meter and you're getting 35-40% usable light in the greenhouse.
so real good question with that one. Actually, while we're on the topic too, since we don't have any other questions, we probably should mention polycarbonate too. So polycarbonate, because it just said greenhouse covering. Polycarbonate lasts longer than poly. And so that stuff's usually 10 to 12 years is when you're going to be replacing that stuff. Oh, yep. Feel free, if you guys have got any questions, put them in the chat box. I'm hoping I can hear your keyboards flying away.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, there's got to be, if we have people persist, you have to have, any question's fine.
Yep, yep. That's what we're here for. We're just here to answer any of your horticultural or greenhouse questions. So. Oh, I've got next one coming up. So as a follow-up to the plastic covering longevity, do people use old plastic as a shading technique in sunny areas such as Arizona?
So you mean use it to put over new plastic, or because it would defeat the purpose to use it as a shading factor in the summertime, and then when we get into short day situation, you're not getting enough light in the greenhouse to grow crops. So yes, in theory, it might help a little bit with shading factor in the summertime, but it's going to hurt you worse when your days get shorter than you're going to gain by using it as a shading technique.
Right. Probably with that, we should probably explain to them just shade cloth, because that might make sense to these guys.
And I don't know whether just because the light, old plastic's still going to transfer heat into the greenhouse, because, you're still going to trap that heat in there. I don't think just by the plastic being older is going to translate much into keeping the greenhouse cooler in the summertime.
Right, right. So the biggest thing with old, you can't really tell a difference. I mean, yes, it starts to yellow, but the biggest thing is it just isn't as clean as like brand new poly. So after just replace it. I've been on greenhouses where they've had, several years past that 4-year mark, and yes, you do see a difference in growth habits inside that greenhouse. Now, if you want shading, there's a couple different options rather than using the actual film itself that would cover the greenhouse. They make different cloth material that you go either inside the greenhouse or over the greenhouse to help reflect some of the sun off the greenhouse itself. And so the whole idea there is, like what Jeff was saying, is we're trying to reflect the light off to make the greenhouse cooler and without trapping in all that excess heat in the summertime. So good question about that. Probably, I know another follow-up we get about plastic is, what do you do with old plastic once you take it off?
Yeah, that's always, I mean, there's plastic recyclers in some locations around the United States. I can't generally tell you of any right off the top of my head.
I've seen it sold. I mean, the plastic is still usable for probably like home and hobby stuff. I wouldn't recommend it for another commercial greenhouse, but I do see people that resell that plastic, put it up on Craigslist, say, come pick up the plastic, or like Jeff was saying, recycle it. So,
well, and I know some farmers around that use it to cover up stacks of hay or straw bales, you know, in the summertime.
yeah.
You know, it's still good for, you know, using to cover things up to keep the weather off of it. There's nothing wrong with it at that point.
Yep. Good questions. So we are 20 minutes into the question session. Woohoo! I see another one. I was going to say, keep the questions going so that way we can answer as many of your desirable questions you've got as possible. So next one is 50 mesh density protective net enough to protect the plants in the greenhouse from external pollen and avoid pollination? And it says, what is the best solution for this issue in your opinion? So I take it from,
I'm not sure that any mesh density is going to keep pollen out of the greenhouse.
right.
Not 100% anyways.
Right. Yeah. What I was going to go with, I've been into a greenhouse where they were doing different plant breeding, and that greenhouse was a completely sealed greenhouse. So they had no outside air exchanges. They had all indoor air handlers and stuff like that. Because the idea is pollen is microscopic. And so there really isn't a effective mesh you could put on there to keep it out. Mostly the screens you see on the greenhouse is for bug and insect control. So when you're trying to deal with pollen, there's really isn't a good way of doing that using a screen-like material.
I'm gonna assume that this question is because they're considering growing hemp in the greenhouse, and there must be some maybe external pollen source that they don't want to come into the greenhouse to damage the flowering crop in there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if the person wants to follow up with that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
To add with it. Usually if you're in the case of that where you're something sensitive like hemp, what they would do is have like an actual physical barrier, or it's just a distance away from the greenhouse to the other plants to try and keep it that way. But the biggest thing, pollen is going to be brought in on insects. So if you can keep insects and other material out of the greenhouse, that helps to a point too. So,
Well, yeah, and the 50 mesh insect screen would probably keep some portion of the pollen out of the greenhouse, but it would never be 100%.
correct. So good question with that one. Oh, I see another one has popped up. If I use a polycarbonate material for covering and siding for a 2-bay startup for a vine crop, and it says, will 100,000 investment be enough for everything? Construction, equipment, hydroponic system, seeding, nutrients, etc.
No, unfortunately not. Generally a 2-bay, which we're talking you know, two 22-foot wide. So we're talking 44 by 128. The structure, like if we did a package, you're looking at somewhere in the 95 to $100,000 range. And then you're going to have construction costs, utility costs, and all on top of that. Generally, what we tell people, depending on what your construction costs are and how much site work needs to be done, how much of the actual construction you're going to do yourself, whether you're going to hire it all out, you're looking at, you know, somewhere 60 to 100% of what the greenhouse package costs from Cropking to be completely up and ready to start planting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say my rule of thumb is on a small greenhouse is probably double your price, more likely to get all the other items needed, and you know, concrete and permits and all that fun stuff. So, but good question on that part. Kind of to go back to that question about the investment in money, you can always go with a smaller structure and add on too. So that's always an option if budget's a possibility, or you have like a set budget you're working with. And again, we do greenhouses in all sorts of different sizes and lengths. So if you're looking at something that way, you can always get a hold of us and we can help you out on your specific project. So I think a new question popped up. How much will replacing the covering cost for a greenhouse that is 30 by 128?
I'm looking right now. I mean, you're roughly looking at somewhere around $1,200 for the covering, plus there'll be some shipping costs associated with that.
Yeah, luckily enough, when it comes to something like that, that's an easier structure. I don't know if you're talking about the actual like labor to do it too, but because it's a freestanding greenhouse, that's an easier task than a gutter connect structure. So good answer, or good question, I should say.
Yeah.
So with that, because we're caught up on questions now, you just want to hit on quick the different size greenhouse, like the framelits that we offer.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, so we manufacture freestanding greenhouses from 12 feet wide, 15 feet wide, 18, 24, and 30 wide. And gutter connect structures are 22-foot wide. And obviously a gutter connect can be, in theory, be added on to bay after bay after bay. Generally, freestanding structures can be any length divisible by 4 feet up to, you know, we don't, with active fan and pad cooling, we don't suggest that they're any longer than 128 feet. Gutter connects, you know, we limit those to the same length, but the lengths are divisible by 8 feet, and that just comes back to post spacing.
Yeah. Yeah, we get that question quite a bit. There's on the website is just a few examples of greenhouse sizes, but if you're looking for a specific greenhouse size, we can kind of make it fit your area. So I know I've gotten that question quite a bit lately. All right, next question. How common is geothermal heating and cooling used in commercial greenhouses?
It's not very common. We do have a couple customers that are using geothermal heating in the greenhouse. They really like it. It works really well. Both of those customers that I can think of, those systems were installed where there was some very generous government rebates on putting those systems in. So their upfront costs were very low. I mean, today, if you went to do geothermal heating in a greenhouse without any rebates or customer government assistance or whatever, the cost of that heating system is probably going to be as much or more than the whole rest of your greenhouse project.
Right.
So yes, in the long run, it does save you a lot of money on heating costs, but the cost of it currently, I don't know whether you could work that into your cash flow enough on return on investment to justify it.
Right.
Because right now, I mean, face it, gas prices, natural gas prices, propane prices are very low. And yes, we probably all know that that's not going to last forever. But, you know, in today's space and climate that we're looking at, I don't know if you could justify the expense of putting in geothermal heating for a greenhouse.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely going to be based on location too. So,
Yeah.
example, if you're somewhere in like the middle continental US or southern US, something like geothermal heating might be a little bit easier for you to achieve. The cooling part might be a little bit harder. But if you're in a real northern climate where we're talking, 4, 5, 6 months of winter, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So, but there are alternative sources of heating and cooling for greenhouses. So there's lots of technology out there. Um, like one part, I know we don't talk about it quite a bit, but we do have a couple greenhouses that we've built that have fog systems in there. And so that whole idea is it's a tall greenhouse and we're spraying water in there and using that evaporation of that water to cool the greenhouse down. So, I mean, there's lots of different technology and techniques out there for heating and cooling greenhouses. So, just
Yeah,
jumping geothermal is not always the first kind of route that we go towards.
well, and generally geothermal heating in a greenhouse is only heating. It's not any active cooling for the greenhouse.
All right. So, good question on that one. Let's see, we've all caught up. We're halfway through it, guys. So make sure if you've got any questions, just fire them at us. We want to make sure to get as many as possible to you and answered. I don't see any coming through at the
I don't
moment.
see any questions coming through.
No, maybe we answered all of them. They just got everything ever they wanted to know.
No.
Nope, I see one coming up. Have you ever seen a dome-shaped or globe-shaped greenhouse?
Yeah, we have. Most of those, as far as I know, are basically some kind of one-off design, custom thing. I don't know of anybody that actually sells like it's this size kind of thing, unless you know of something, Jake.
Oh, yeah, I'm digging through my old files. I've seen them before. I know it's more common for like, down in like the southwest part of the US. I know there's a company that makes them. But again, like Jeff was saying, it's kind of a one-off. It's not a real popular thing. So,
And yeah, I don't know what the benefits of having that kind of a structure to grow in would be compared to more normal, quote, normal design greenhouse.
right. You probably, I do have to say now to go with that whole part, for dome for commercial use. Now, as everyone's probably seeing with the news and why we do these Zoom meetings, there are some kit ones that you see like online that are clear domes that I know people have been using at different restaurants for outdoor space. Those are definitely something that I've seen that people can order online from different companies, but I really wouldn't consider that a greenhouse. It's more of like a dome with plastic over top.
Yeah, it's more like a shelter or.
Yeah. So good question about that. Again, guys, if you have any questions, just put them in the box. We want to definitely make sure we can get them answered. Or if you're too shy to ask a question on here and have us answer them, you can always email us or call the office here. That's always a good option too. So just checking if anybody sent us any questions, and I've not seen any at the moment.
I mean, questions, don't always have to relate to just the greenhouse structure too. We talk about crops, talk about any nutrients, plant problems, insect problems. I mean, it's got to be, somebody has to have some question out there.
Yeah, I was going to say most of our day between myself, I get quite a few people and growers that will send me pictures of plants and say, okay, what's going on here? Or like another recent example I had was somebody was having real slow growth on their plants. And what we tracked it down was his greenhouse was getting too cold at night. So, I mean, you guys can ask anything. It would probably come through. We figured the other day, what, we have over 100 years of horticultural experience in the office.
More than that, but yeah.
So there's only been a few things that have kind of, takes us a second to really be like, oh, I haven't seen that before. So.
Nowadays it's more like, well, I've seen that. I just have to try to remember what it is and where we've seen it at.
Yeah, which project it came from. So. Yeah, just out of curiosity, for the people who have attended, you can even put it in the chat box or the question and answer. How many of you guys are actually using Cropking systems now? Just always curious. Oh, I got one that came through. Can you review my business plan and critique it? We'd be happy to help, take a look at it and stuff. I have a feeling you probably got one of our business plans from here. Marilyn's the one who wrote and built that whole program. And I know that she's worked with many people to help get them up and going. So yeah, we definitely can help you out with that. And that, in case anybody who's on this question part and didn't know that, we do offer business plans. We do seeds, lights. Help me out here, Jeff. What don't we do? Might be the
yeah. I mean, we could do managed services to whatever level that you feel like it would be helpful to you.
Got it.
We do what as much as what's possible to try to keep our customers as successful as they can be. Anywhere from from day one when they start with us, we work with them. We can do on-site work while do the construction phase, do on-site stuff to get them started up and going in the right direction. stay in contact with us and tell us what's going on so we can, help you stay on the right track.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, the one came through is one of the attendees has her stuff and says they usually bother you for questions. So
Ah.
yeah, if you call in, you either there's kind of easy to remember. All of the tech guys here, names start with J usually.
Yeah.
So it's either Jake, Jeff, Jim, Jay. Trying to think of any other ones.
Yeah. Well, we got Zach though.
Oh yeah, so we have one.
He's the only odd one of the bunch.
So if you call in and say you talk to a guy with a name that starts with a J, that doesn't help us out a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah.
But kind of fun side note. Hey, with that, we are at like 11:40. That means we got like 20 more minutes. Again, we're here till noon, so feel free to throw in your questions up until that point. Oh, here we go. Can you discuss general problem growers have with tomatoes and how to prevent the problems?
General problems.
Well, first one I can think of off the top of my head, Jeff, is going to be what variety of tomatoes you pick.
Well,
So,
yeah, that's the beginning of it. I mean, probably the one problem that we talk about the most is managing your EC and pH within the crop through the crop year. I mean, there's times when the weather can make that a bit difficult. And our customers get busy harvesting and maintaining the plants, and sometimes they don't do their daily checks and things get away from them. Those are probably some of the most common things.
yeah. Yeah, like a lot of so all the tomatoes we grow are a hybrid and they're indeterminate tomatoes. And right there, that helps solve some of our issues. If you try and grow something that's not a hybrid, they usually leave themselves to more disease and bug issues. And so right there, as long as you pick a good seed and variety to start with, they usually treat you pretty well. Now let's go past the type of tomato, or excuse me, the tomato you choose. Beefsteaks are going to be obviously a little bit easier than the cherries. So when you start going into the specific variety of tomatoes themselves, they can kind of get tricky. But like some of the common problems we see is, lack of pruning on them, any of the maintenance, if you let it get away from you, can kind of compound and cause issues with the plants later on. So, if you get real caught up, like Jeff was saying, got busy, and you wind up being, what do you want to say? You wind up forgetting to like lean and lower for a week, that can cause issues. If you forget to go through there and take leaves off, you can throw the plants out of balance.
Yeah.
Tomatoes are super finicky where if you don't keep them happy, they can switch from being reproductive back to being vegetative. And all of a sudden you won't be getting the flowers you need. And so you want to make sure that you keep steering that plant the way you want to. That's probably the biggest.
Yeah. I mean, when you get behind on your leading and lowering or removing leaves in the bottom or keeping suckers pruned off, keeping plants tied up, I mean, what may take you an hour to do under normal conditions can take you 3 to 4 times as long. So catching up is sometimes, I shouldn't say impossible, but you're flirting with that impossible time period to try to get the plants caught up. And the longer the plants are not caught up on, the more out of balance they get. And then you get to what like Jake was talking about, they go from that reproductive phase back to their vegetative place, and then you start having flowers drop off, or they don't set good, you only get one fruited cluster. I mean, all those problems are, a lot of times are related back to either not keeping up with your plant maintenance or, not managing your nutrient solution, getting your EC out of whack.
Yeah, yeah. And then the one thing I want to go back to on like plant canopy management and stuff, let's say you slack off for a little bit. Well, you add more leaves in there. Now you're adding more humidity into that area. Then you're going to start seeing disease problems and places for insects to hide. And so one of the other problems I see that people forget to do too is maintenance sprays. So it's like, oh, the plants look great. Everything is going wonderful. I'm just not going to spray this week, or, oh, I'm going to put that off.
Yeah.
You may be able to get away with that 1 or 2 times, but eventually that's going to catch up to you. And so the biggest problem we see, and this can go for the lettuce side too, is when people start getting kind of complacent and not taking all the steps or trying to do shortcuts. That's when you start seeing problems kind of catch up to the plants. So like, yeah, you can take a shortcut once in a blue moon, but if you do it consistently, that's when you start going to have running into problems. So
I would tell you to set up, make a schedule, a weekly schedule of, your general jobs that need to be done with whatever crop you're growing every week, and stick to that schedule.
yeah.
That's the best way to keep your plant maintenance and all those related things, on track.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't have a copy here. It's at my other desk, but a checklist. So we have it set down. So like on Mondays they're gonna do this process, Tuesdays they're gonna do this, and you kind of just work through that. And it seems kind of redundant, but that's just, it's always like for here we always know Monday we harvest lettuce, Tuesday we're cleaning channels, Tuesday if we clean the channels we replant them. And so it's kind of a everyday boom, 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 because even in tomatoes too, once they're up and running throughout the whole growing season, they pretty much do the same thing day after day after day. So it's pretty easy to get on that schedule and take care of them. So we got 2 questions out of that little through all that stuff. One is, do you have a general maintenance schedule? So just like you have a schedule for the plants, you also have one for your equipment inside the greenhouse. So it's like, okay, this is stuff I'm going to check every day. Like you make sure the pump is working, check your filters. Every week you're going to check, or every day really, you want to check to make sure you've got fertilizer for everything. Then there's things we do like weekly, like we make sure all the probes are calibrated. Everything is working correctly that way. And then there's things that we do like once a season, like obviously
like seasonal maintenance, like seasonal maintenance going into the winter months would be making sure all your heating equipment has been serviced and working properly. Your air circulation fans are running properly, belts are tight. Those fan blades and housings have been cleaned. They're not don't have a big layer of dust and dirt and all that on them. And then when you're going into the springtime, then you need to make sure, are all my exhaust fans working properly? Are they cleaned up, or do the belts need replaced or tightened? Is my wet wall clean? Does my wet wall pump work? Have I taken it apart and cleaned it? Vent doors work, all of the equipment in the greenhouse should be looked at several times a year and make sure that it's operating efficiently.
Yeah.
One thing we hear about more in later spring, early summer is my greenhouse won't stay cool like it did the year before, and because your fan belts are wore out and they're slipping. Even a tight fan belt, if it's worn, is going to slip, because it depends on the width of that belt to grab that groove in the pulley. And once they get worn to a certain point, doesn't matter how tight they are, they're just going to slip. And the more they slip, the worse it gets.
Yeah. 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 And the other part too is when we talk about maintenance schedule too, we also want to in there go with, and this is kind of goes more to like plant maintenance, but we also want to be scouting for pests. So like every
That's
week,
right.
you're going to go through there and you just look for, do I have any bugs flying around? Are these the bugs that are causing issues? Or are these beneficial bugs that I put in here on a maintenance kind of part? So yeah, and again, we have checklists are probably the easiest way of doing this. So we have the same thing of like weekly tasks we do in the greenhouse. And then there's always a checklist of like, okay, we're going to look at, your injector, your pumps, the fan, belts, make sure like before it gets dark this time of year, make sure your lights work going in and out of the greenhouse. So, I mean, there's little things that you got to check every so often to make sure everything is working properly. So with that, we got one. And the question is, what is a maintenance spray? So,
Um, well, a maintenance spray would be spraying for a disease or a pest that has either caused problems or you anticipate it causing a problem. Um, maybe more so right now in leafy green crops, lettuce this time of year, powdery mildew can be a problem. So growers are doing a once a week maintenance spray to as a preventative measure. Um, because you don't want to get powdery mildew, get a good foothold in your greenhouse this time of year. It'd be almost impossible to get rid of it if that happens.
yeah, yeah. Other things we do is like some of the beneficial bacteria. So like cease would be kind of a maintenance spray.
Yeah,
Yeah, out here, my mind's drawing a blank. There's another one I can think of off the top of my head.
for
For insects.
oh, you mean Botanigard?
Yep, that's it, Botanigard. So there's some of this stuff that's how those products worked is you need them having them already present
Yeah,
there. And so that's kind of when we call a maintenance spray. It's going to be for either like an insect control or a specific pathogen. Um, that's kind of a maintenance spray. So
and a lot of our growers don't. I mean, a majority of them don't do any maintenance spraying. I mean, maintenance spraying is something that you're doing as a preventative, so you're anticipating some disease or insect problems and applying materials to at least keep it from getting a foothold.
right, right. Next question we got says, do you have a workshop specifically for microgreen growers?
No, we don't. I mean, the workshops that we do covers all those kinds of crops from tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, leafy greens, lettuce. I mean, microgreens are basically in that whole leafy green arena of growing methods and how you grow it and the same kind of environment. Wouldn't you agree with that, Jake? There isn't anything much past that, is there?
No, no. And I was going to say microgreens is there's a lot more detail you need for growing leafy greens than per se microgreens themselves. So we do hit on microgreens. I would throw fodder in that same group.
Yeah.
It's more of like seed germination, seed starting. And I know we have quite a few clips and videos we do about it, but it's just one part that we cover like in our general workshops, which our next workshops aren't until 2021. The schedule will be coming out here soon, but we do these questions every other week. So if you have a specific microgreen question, feel free to ask us or you can call in and do that. But no, we don't do a specific just microgreen workshop. So
Yeah, and just as a general outlook, microgreens are really easy to grow.
Yep.
the more difficult part of growing microgreens is, you know, getting them harvested and packaged and marketing them. You know, we can tell you how to harvest and package, but it still can be somewhat of a challenge because you have to pick the right time. They have to be dry, and, you know, marketing, finding a market for that problem, for that product, can, you know, sometimes be difficult. That's why we don't have any customers that only grow microgreens. Most of our customers that are growing microgreens are growing it as part of their, just to enhance the sales of their major crop, which is usually lettuce and leafy green crop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of just something that they add to the portfolio, or I know
Yeah.
quite a few growers that will grow them just as like a display piece. Microgreens are cool because on some of them, like radishes, from the time you start to the time you harvest it might only be 8 days, where
Yeah.
a head of lettuce takes us 6 weeks in the wintertime. So it's kind of the turnaround time is quite a bit for microgreens. So I see another question. Can we register for the 2021 workshops now? When will you be starting date registrations for the next workshops? You can send us an email. We'll put you on the list. We haven't actually sat down with the calendar yet and said, okay, these are the specific times where we'll do it in, like, you know, online workshop like we've been doing starting 2021. But most likely the first one will be sometime in January. We just haven't picked a date yet. Obviously, it'll probably be more towards the end of the month in January, not around the holidays. So,
Yeah.
but again, email us. We can throw you on a list, and that way we can go from it that way. I do know we're going to be offering quite a more of these videos where you'll be able to watch them online in 2021, and then you can come back to these kind of question and answer sessions that we're going to answer that way to kind of make it more convenient, because we all know with everything going on, it's hard to like, okay, I'm going to set aside a 6-hour block to watch one webinar. And so that's kind of what we're working on for 2021. So really good question. It is 11:58 by my clock, so I think we've got time for one more question, maybe two if they're quick ones. We do appreciate everybody coming through and taking the time to spend an hour with us.
I think it was a good session.
Yeah.
You know, we'll continue to do these as long as our customers continue to, you know, find questions for us to answer.
Yep. And the nice thing about it is just another option for you guys to get in contact with us. I mean, you can always call us, email. That's what we're here for. So, and then the question I see, will the 2021 online workshop be the same as the 2020? I'm going to say no. We're working on updating it. This whole doing things online, Zoom stuff, is kind of changing our style of the workshop. So the 2020 we have a lot more videos showing of stuff we've got going on around here or different projects rather than just a talked over slideshow. So we're working on it. Eventually we're building a library. So like this Q&A session is getting recorded and will go up on YouTube. And then I believe the other ones we've had are up there already. So people can start watching these and kind of looking at them throughout the whole time to kind of get a different source of information. And I think eventually they're going to put all these together. So that way there's just one set of like, okay, here's all the light questions. Here's all the, you know, fertilizer questions. But good question with that. So with that, that happened to be the last question for today. Again, thanks to everybody who attended. Our next one coming up, let me check the calendar. Looks like it will be December 4th. So that will be Friday, December 4th, 11 to 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So thanks everybody for coming and spending the hour with us.
Everybody have a great day. Happy Thanksgiving. Be safe out there.